right, so we touched on a little earlier. So this year, you launched a label, Greyfade, all one word. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about starting that and the reason, some of the reasons, but what have the surprises or challenges kind of, what's the process been like to get this up and running?
It's been, again, pretty organic. I had the idea for a few years, so it's been something that's kind of been in the back of my mind, like kind of percolating. And last year I kind of decided it was time to take the plunge. It's just like a lot of it is logistical stuff that I feel like I was pretty well prepared for by like the studio work, just kind of like staying on a production schedule and like knowing when things need to be delivered to who. So the label's doing vinyl and high resolution downloads. So the high resolution download part was just a matter of figuring out how to like get the mechanics of that working on a website so people could download that. I know you can do it through Bandcamp, but it's a little bit trickier and more labyrinthine. But and then the vinyl manufacturing part it's not that difficult to get together. But it's been really gratifying so far, I would say. Although it's only been launched now for a month, but it's really nice to feel like you have like ownership over your work, that it's not I've worked with labels in the past and I've had good relationships with them, but there's something to be said for like having control over all aspects of the way the thing is presented.
Yeah.
And that's been really gratifying, and I feel like so far the response has been really cool.
And then the physical distribution. So those of us who still live in cities that have record stores, can they find the record? Is it out, or are
I'm doing it all like mail,
Okay.
like mail only at this point.
Great.
There's no distributors as of now. I'm imagining that once the catalog gets a little bigger, it might be distributed through someone else. But for the moment, I'm just doing the fulfillment, making the post office runs, which is kind of fun. But yeah, eventually I think there will be some more proper distribution.
Okay. And now I have to imagine, as now that you have a label and you're working with a lot of clients that would maybe, make music that they're looking for a home, how do you see the crossover, or maybe even a potential conflict of interest in terms of, working with somebody and then also, you're essentially A&R for a label now.
Right. I think I've tried to keep the aesthetic and like musical direction of the label like pretty narrow and specific. It's kind of focused on like very minimalist music, both electronic and acoustic or chamber music. So a lot of the jazz clients, I think, get that it's just like not totally the thing for them. But I have had people kind of not totally understanding what it is yet, and they just hear label and they're like, oh, do you want to check out my thing? Which is natural.
Yeah.
But I hope that as it gains traction, there'll be a bit of a like divide, and people will understand that I'm not releasing like free jazz records, or I'm not releasing like indie rock records. It's kind of like a very narrow band of stuff that I'm going to be doing. So I don't really find that there's much conflict in that way. But the one thing on the inverse of that, I am very excited about the potential that I could kind of take under my wing certain projects and sort of invest extra time to things that I really care about. Like I was saying before, those projects when I go home and I'm like, I wish this could just be a little bit more X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
I'd like to use the label as kind of like a platform for my engineering stuff and producing to kind of like go to the next level with that. So I don't think it's going to be a requirement that I engineer and produce the stuff on the label, but I am hoping that there will be like those kind of collaborative things where I'm not the musician or the composer, but that I can like help shape the sonics and really spend time on making it as good as it can be.
Yeah. And how many releases a year do you think you'll be looking to put out?
Very few. I want to focus on like quality rather than quantity. So it'll probably be like no more than 3 a year. That's kind of the and it's just me so far working on this. So there's also just the logistical concerns, but I also just from a musical point of view feel like it's better to kind of have something that's, little islands that are just well constructed rather than a deluge of just stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So it'll be kind of a couple things a year maybe.
Yeah. And we were talking about earlier, the idea of maybe when you're younger in your career, you're first getting started, saying yes to everything and then as you go through maybe being a little more intentional, how much of this, going back to the beginning, you're performing music, you're composing music, you're mixing, recording your own music for others. I mean, how much of this was as a sort of a grand plan, or how much of this is happy accidents? Like, how did you get to this place?
It's more towards the grand plan, I would say, but with some serendipity in there, for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's sort of a philosophical question, but it's kind of like, how do you become what you are or whatever?
Yeah.
It's sort of a combination of like, I mean, in this business, you have to be really into it and focus on what you're doing. I think to succeed and work at like the highest level. Well, not that I'm there yet, but I feel like, you have to really be committed and dedicated to what you're doing. And so I've always envisioned myself as someone who can like fluidly work between engineer and musician and composer and programmer and all these, label runner or whatever the proper noun is there.
Yeah.
And so that in the back of my mind, I always kind of had that vision for myself, but it also, like, the serendipity thing comes into play because it's the sequence of events and like the people you meet and the way that it exactly coalesces is not really within your control. But I feel like if you have that intention of like where you're trying to go, you're not going to quite get there, but you're going to get somewhere close, and it might be even cooler than what you originally were thinking.
And what would be an example of that? And you don't have to name names per se, but like something that sticks out where, maybe a chance encounter or something, and it kind of made a little left turn for you.
Oh, well, a perfect example is the first record that's coming out on the label is this thing with me and vocalist Theo Bleckman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been a fan of Theo's stuff since I was like 16 years old. His work with Ben Monder, who I also got to work on a few records with, and et cetera, et cetera. But I didn't really know him that well. And we had only worked a little bit on Ben's stuff. And I went to a friend's wedding, and I sat at a table with Theo, and we just had like a really fun time that day, like drinking like whiskey sours and just goofing around. It wasn't really we didn't talk about music or anything. It was just like a very fun day. And then through that, he kind of like started checking out some stuff I'd been doing, sounds I'd been making and whatever, and said, "Hey, do you want to jam?" So that kind of led to this record. So it's sort of like someone that I really respected and had always wanted to work with, but it wasn't necessarily me like calling him up being like, "Hey, do you want to work together?" It was kind of like you're just in this environment where when opportunities come, you're ready to like make the move, but you don't always like kind of know when that's going to happen. So I just think of all this as like it plays out over longer time scales. You have to be very patient. It's not like you're not going to like work with your hero after like an hour. You have to like accept that it might take 30 years or something. But that's fine, as long as you're like still on that path. I think that energy can still keep me very excited to know that like, oh, there's probably still tons of people, that I never thought I'd work with that I might someday. That's kind of like cool.
Right.
So that's an example of that. But it is funny how that works, because you can have an idea of where you want to be, but you might get there through like the strangest route. Yeah.
I know it's been described much more eloquently than I will say it, but I've heard it described as, people say, "Oh, well, you need a certain amount of luck," or, "Oh, this person was lucky because this happened." And, what you hit on is part of luck is being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So when those moments of opportunity present themselves, you're ready for action.
Yeah.
And but people call that luck, and they don't see that side of it.
The other one thing I would add to that is that even if you're not prepared, you just also like can say yes, because I think weirdly that's been another dark secret in my work, is that I've been called to do things where I have absolutely no qualification to do it. Really, like I can just say that flatly. I have there's 100 people that could do this job better than me. Or even I've gotten jobs where they literally, this is real, like they thought they were calling a different person and they were calling me. They were like, "You worked on this last record, right?" And I was like, "No." And they were like, "Oh, well, can you do this record?"
Yeah.
And so it's not what I'm really saying is that even times when you get called for something where it's a little bit over your head, I feel like it's important to just level up. So whether you're prepared or not, it's kind of like jump and the net will appear sort of thing. Like you don't need to you don't need to know that you can do it. Just like jump off the cliff and like make the parachute on the way down.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's something that like constantly recurs for me. Like I just think to myself like, I don't know how I got into this, but I got to get myself out and I got to like do a competent job. So it's being prepared, but it's also like accepting that sometimes you're not going to be prepared.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. And the other side of that is maybe when we face situations or challenges where things are more difficult than we expected, or, you know, we all go through phases where we feel down on ourselves, maybe not as far along as we want to be. You're not doing exactly what we want to be. I mean, what has your strategy been kind of pushing through those moments?
Again, just like for me, it's always imagining what's the end game, or what's the next thing that I'm striving towards. And I mean, yeah, there are definitely days where you're kind of like, you can get a little bit defeated by the grind of it, or just, you know, weeks where maybe there's not as much work, or you see something on Facebook where it's like, oh man, I thought I did a great job in that record, and now they're using this other engineer, or some like weird moments like that. But I think you have to take the long view, which is just like no hard feelings. You know, I'm doing the best work I possibly can within the circumstances, and like my intentions are pure.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the best work I can and like help people make the music that they want. Like that's where I begin from. So take the long view and like just realize that you're going to be in the game for a long time, and you know that I think those things like iron themselves out, and you'll gravitate towards the right people in time.
Yeah. Well, where can people find out more about the work that you're doing?
So I have a website, just my name, josephbranciforte.com, and my label, Greyfade, is just greyfade.com, greyfade.com, and that has info on the first record that I just put out with Theo and some other stuff that's upcoming.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for having us. It's been fantastic studio hang. Joseph Branciforte. Check out Greyfade. Check out the label, check out the studio, and all the great projects that he's been a part of. And this is Ryan from Red Panda Recording. Until next time, take care, guys.